Anthony Darby. I'm here with Dave Myrowitz. How are you, man?
Very well.
You are in charge of outdoor cultivation at CULTA.
Yep, that's correct.
Is that a title or?
So I'm the outdoor cultivation manager. I run the outdoor department, and this is my third year running the outdoor there.
So give me a little information. Tell me who you are, where you're from, how you got to CULTA.
Sure. So it's a long story, but I'll give you the cliff notes. I'm from Maryland originally, so it's nice to be back here in my home.
Shout out Hereford Zone.
I
You
know.
told me you're from Hereford Zone. You know you want to say Hereford. Shout out to
Yep.
Hereford.
So Hereford, up right up there by Pennsylvania. So if you're not familiar, the Hereford Zone is a little country town out there in northern Baltimore. Grew up on a farm there. Kind of went about the world for a little while. I was an EMT in Baltimore, and I had wasn't doing great in my life as far as where I needed to be. I dropped out of college. I was addicted to narcotics. I had an opiate dependency from breaking my back. So I was in a pretty low spot, and I ended up going mountain climbing in California. Quit my job, bought a one-way ticket to California, sold all my stuff. Had a buddy who was into mountaineering, and to try and kind of get clean and get my life together, I went out and hitchhiked and climbed mountains for a while in Northern California, Southern California. At the end of that,
What were some of your biggest takeaways from that?
Well, I'd say cannabis saved my life. You know, when I got out to Northern California, like I said, I was kind of hitchhiking and mountain climbing, and the people I was with were going to work on a farm out there, and I tagged along just to make some side money, not really sure what I was doing.
Sure.
And just went out and set up a big outdoor field for a farmer out there. Worked my way up, started as a seasonal laborer there, and fast forward 3 years later, I'm running that farm. And then I started my own small farm.
You fell in love with that process. For you, it seemed like you were kind of soul searching. You go out to Northern California, it's nice weather, you're outside.
Yeah.
You felt like you were more in touch with like yourself, right?
I'm telling you, if I could set up that rehab for all the addicts out there, I'm telling you, go out there, you do hard manual labor, you smoke as much medical cannabis as you possibly can, and you stay clean, out isolated in the redwoods in the mountains. It works. I got 3 or 4 of my buddies clean doing it.
Yeah, we're not everyone. This is not an FDA approved segment, but I agree that there's a lot to those couple elements: heavy exercise regimens, getting back outside, getting back in touch with nature, and then using cannabis to help supplement and fulfill some of those desires and, quite honestly, the side effects of giving up opioids, right? Your body's going through withdrawal, your body's got chemical imbalances, and cannabis, in my mind, is a really incredible tool for someone that's going through that pain, that withdrawal. And I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories of very similar to that. And there's we have a veteran that we work really close with, a gentleman named Eric Stamper, and he was an alcoholic and got into farming and has a hemp farm in Maryland, and kind of the same thing. I mean, it's his safe zone. It's his place where he can go and find zen. And I think as more and more folks understand therapeutic values of cannabis, these rehab centers that they have, that are live-in facilities, that are multiple month programs of getting people back aligned with themselves and off of substance abuse and things like that. You're gonna see more and more of them out there. It's something that I honestly aspire, like my long-term goals. We weren't going to talk about recreational, but hypothetically, recreationally down the road 3 or 5 years, I think cannabis bed and breakfast would be a cool business model to run. But more importantly, I think these cannabis inpatient centers for folks that have mental health issues, depression, some of these things that today maybe we're just throwing pills at, could be better suited in a 14 to 21 day intervention period, in a controlled environment, a safe setting, but mentioning those characteristics that you brought up. So, kudos to you for at one point saying, hey, I deserve better than this in my life, and my family and friends want more from me than just to be someone who's so dependent upon a drug that I'm going to, take a really drastic measure and go hitchhike and go out to California and try to find myself. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think has something to do with rewiring the pathways in your brain. When you're so deep into addiction, the only synapses that gets you to joy is that drug. And so then your brain tells you that there is no other pathway. And so when you get out there and you see the natural beauty splendor of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and you're breathing heavy and you're smoking really good cannabis that helps your body get out of those withdrawal feelings, all of a sudden you rerouted that pathway to joy again without going through the drug. So I think it is something that's going to continue to evolve in the industry and the world, and hopefully we can be a part of it to help grow that medicine for people.
So did you miss the East Coast?
No. Well, I mean, I miss people. I missed the type of humor that you have on the East Coast, everybody shit talking and fast talking and that pace of life. And that's actually one of the things that made me successful in California, was that I came into these farms where people are like kind of, trying to work the least amount possible to smoke the most possible until they got kicked off the farm kind of feeling. And I came in like, man, I got this East Coast hustle. If you're not going to take it, somebody else is going to take it out from you. You got to compete to get there. And so, it was like night and day coming in with that East Coast hustle to the West Coast opportunities.
So you mentioned that within a few years you were running the field. You mentioned you have a leadership position with CULTA.
Yeah.
One of my whys of why I got into the cannabis industry was because I knew that the cannabis plant was a tool that could be used a lot differently than the narrative out there in public. And I knew that I played goalie in lacrosse. I could compete in business. I knew that I could work 16-hour days and smoke and do all these different things. And it was funny. I find myself sometimes, and the cannabis industry is ever evolving, and has maturated so much on the East Coast in the last 5 years. But in the beginning, it was like a lot of the people that I was competing against, I felt like were more of the stereotypical stoner mentality of slow and low. They just didn't have a lot of drive. Things didn't have a high sense of urgency to do things. And I came in, I'm like, boom, boom, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to be lean. I brought all this stuff I worked at companies like American Express and SAP, and I brought all this finance and technology and high operational knowledge into the cannabis space. And I feel like when you're able to do that, you have a successful marketing career, and then you like Brandon, who understood social media and how to do marketing, and then you throw it into an engine like the cannabis industry, it becomes that much more valuable. So I can tell that by your drive and your work ethic, I can imagine how much it would differentiate you from out there. But then coming back to the East Coast, I could tell that that's still prevalent in you today. And a lot of people I bring on the podcast, I try to bring that out because, your story, I can't imagine that you were lighting the world on fire, making tons and tons of money out there. And if you were, it was only because you were working so much harder than everybody else. But the cannabis space it often takes a lot of times of grit, a lot of times of just passion, of this love for the plant, knowing that cannabis is an amazing tool, and then kind of sacrificing for a few years before you actually get that shot, before you get your chance. I always say that luck is where opportunity meets preparation. Right. So you had this work ethic even when you were down on your luck, so to say. Bring that to this job, and then you just outperformed everybody else, and then that's how you kind of leveraged yourself to get to where you're at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you mentioned earlier that there's this stereotype of this lazy stoner. And I think that those same people would have been lazy without weed.
Yeah.
Those are just lazy people that happen to smoke.
Great point.
And so, I smoked cannabis, and I go and run up a 14,000-foot mountain while I'm hitting my vape pen. So don't tell me it makes me lazy, And so to me, it's much more about the person and less about the substance that you're using there. To me, it's inspiring. I can... if I'm able to smoke, I can go longer than if I wasn't. So... I think it's much more about the person, and that wherever you go, you're going to either do well in that industry or not. And so it was great bringing that East Coast to the West Coast and getting that hustle and that drive and that ambition and like go-getter attitude. And then to bring the West Coast knowledge then back to the East Coast, where they go, I guess we can do an outdoor grow, in Maryland. No one's doing it. So, right. And, so that was also a kind of trying to take the best of both worlds.
How long have you been at CULTA?
This is my 4th year.
So you were part of the first outdoor grow?
Mm-hmm. I was part of the first indoor grow. So I initially was hired as an indoor grower. So when CULTA, before there was any CULTA, when they were just talking about it, I got interviewed by Bickle Consulting, who was the cannabis consultants that helped set up and design and do all that, the legwork of actually getting it up off the ground. They're still heavily involved. And then myself, Luke, Batten, and Jay, who you interviewed already. We basically built and set up the indoor grow the first year, got that up and running.
So I toured every year.
Right. So you've seen it kind of expand. Yeah.
The first time I was meeting Mackie, and I was going to meet a couple other people. I remember I had on super nice shoes. And I remember I didn't get to the door. They were covered in mud.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everything was just so much different back then. The facilities, it's amazing to see the growth, but I don't think, honestly, there was more than 30 employees there the first year I was there, right? I mean,
yeah,
it was
definitely
small.
not. Yeah, we were a really small team.
Like,
we're growing fast.
Bumping.
Yeah, yep. I don't even know everybody's name anymore. Yeah.
I know everyone's name, but we just hired our first 2 employees that I didn't interview. Up until that point, I'd interviewed every single employee, but we were just growing so fast. We need to get people in. We just got to a point where, it's wild to see it evolve. So you've been with CULTA from the jump.
From the very beginning, yep. It's been labor of love.
That's awesome. So were you kind of like in the corner just being like, we should go outdoor,
To be perfectly honest, when they first mentioned outdoor, I was kind of like, oh, that's a nightmare. You're going to grow humidity, outdoor in the swamp with the hurricanes. To me, coming from perfect conditions, California and the hills of Sonoma, where, you couldn't make a better conditions for an outdoor grow,
Yeah, I was just out in Arizona a couple weeks ago, and although it's dry out there, I'll
take dry.
They have light 300. It's sunny 360 days a year. The greenhouses out there are huge. It's just the labor out there is so much different than the labor we see here. It was way more big ag than it seemed like here. But you guys have a huge operation, and I've seen it continue to grow.
Yeah, and then the more that we started talking about it, I realized, hey, if anybody's going to get to give it a shot, I want it to be me. So I'll take it. And boy, am I glad I did. It ended up being really successful and got to learn a lot and do really, really cool stuff out there. Building in a swamp is kind of wild.
And you guys pulled a car out of the swamp at one point.
There's railroad tracks under there. It's an industrial wasteland swamp area that it's kind of been forgotten junkyard.
I think from an economic development standpoint, I always bring this up because Cambridge, and I don't know anything contrary to this, has been incredibly supportive of you guys and the growth that you guys have gone through. I know that when Mackie was shopping around towns of where he wanted to start his plan, Crisfield was one of the towns that came to the opportunity, and they basically were just like, no, we don't want that in our city. And I look at the 100 plus jobs that's created by CULTA. I think about this plot of land that I saw that had no identity and no use, and now it's a place where people go to work, and the logos are on outside of buildings. It's a whole vibe.
Yeah.
And it's economic development at its purest, and I love economic development, and I think that's how you get the freedom. I think it's how you improve people's lives. Sometimes the fastest is by giving them opportunities to improve themselves economically. And I think it's great what you guys continue to do. And I just want to continue to highlight if there's cities and towns that, as we go into places like New Jersey's getting ready to have adult use, Pennsylvania is going to be expanding their program. Virginia is going to be expanding their program. There's going to be cities that are going to ask themselves, how is this going to affect my city and town? And I just hope that they look at towns like Cambridge, towns like Salisbury that have been embracing of us. We created 30 good paying jobs. We have happy employees. We have the tax revenue and stuff that we generate back is extraordinary compared to what most small businesses do. So it's been a really great win-win scenario for us. Is we know what happens when cities and municipalities try to put their feet in the ground and make it harder for operators. It can be incredibly challenging. So, kudos to you guys for making good on the plans that you guys set out. That conversation that Mackie had was probably 3 years ago at the Hyatt that I was with, where he said, we'll have more than 100 jobs, we'll have more than these things, and he's made good on them.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. And you think about...
not just Mackie, all the leadership team that calls. I know it's not just him.
Yeah, but...
he's the figurehead that gets the credit.
Definitely. And you think of... obviously, there's the jobs, which are above the average paying jobs in those towns, And then also, you think about all the... I bought a house there in Cambridge. Lots of people that are like... entry-level employees that are able now to purchase instead of renting. You're increasing property values. All those people have to go somewhere to eat. So we have all these things that are bringing commerce to Cambridge. And you're also bringing artists and musicians and all kinds of interesting people, this influx of new blood and new breath to a kind of stagnant area in a lot of ways, where this was just a drive-through town on your way to Ocean City. You stop to get gas, you get some McDonald's, you keep moving. The Ironman comes once a year, and that's it. So now all of a sudden there's this hustle, there's this, this hub of commerce and excitement and new life to a town.
And Vario, they brought the same thing to Dorchester County as well. It was good that they were open-minded to multiple operators. It's all good. To your point, it's been very positive, and I think we need to be good stewards of this opportunity and responsibility and set the precedent that this can be successful, that this doesn't have to be looked at as a negative. It can be a huge positive for your small town and community. So tell me a little bit about your day-to-day life. So first off, real quick, is everything harvest at this point?
No. We are.
Are you what the fuck am I doing?
I was harvesting this morning.
What am I doing an interview right now? And I got plants to get out of the ground because I toured this time last year, and you guys had expanded acreage pretty significantly last year, correct? Yep. And it was, we could use a little more space to do some of this drying.
Yeah, definitely.
I think this is an understatement.
It's a chaotic time of year. It's a celebration time of year. You've worked all year for this moment. So on one hand, you're like, okay, this is the end of the marathon. We're crossing the finish line. Time for high fives. But you also have about 6 weeks of really, a
and
lot
the drying
high
and curing
flavor.
is, you could do amazing work in those fields, correct? And then not
it can
do
all
a
be
great
ruined
job
at the end.
and drying and curing and lose a lot of it. And we saw that in the very beginning of the program. Patients we have to have product. Cure gives us product. They probably could have taken a little bit more time to dry and cure it. Oh, they didn't even dry and cure this properly. What do you want? Do you want to wait 3 more weeks for product, or do you want properly dried and cured product? And I know there's different ways of drying and curing, but this particular, it just, some of these things cannot be rushed. You can't always rush a growth cycle. You can't always rush a drying and curing process and think you're going to get the same quality that if you did take your time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really, to me, it's kind of like growing a really great steer. You make a great steak, but if the guy cooking it messes it up, well, boy, if you overcook the steak, it's
right.
It's no good. So it's the same thing with cannabis. You take all this time to grow it over a whole year of preparation and planting and pruning and trellising and IPM spray, doing all the things that you're trying to do to keep it perfect. And then you hand this perfect thing off to the post-harvest or the cure, and they say, okay, now don't drop my baby now,
right, exactly.
And so that is one of the things where you really have to have a good team around you. You can't just have good management. You can't just have good cultivation. You can't just have good post-harvest. You have to have all those aspects of the team all have to be firing and operating at a high level, because any one of those can drop the ball and it's all for nothing.
Sure.
So that is where having a great team like CULTA really, really pays off. We have really motivated people that are trying their best every day, for the love of the product. So I think that is something that is really key, and you can't be so myopic with your blinders on and going, okay, just worry about the grow room. What about the cure room? What about the veg room? What about the packaging?
Which next do we have coming in for next cycle? How do we make sure that we have the highest likelihood of success?
Yeah.
So what's your day-to-day like?
So because it is a farm, we do change, seasonally. It will really change what your day-to-day is like. We have a greenhouse, a retractable greenhouse, and then we have fields outside of that, and then we have a head house. It's like a support building.
Retractable greenhouse is dope because I was there.
That is pretty cool.
And the sun went up, and it closed. Right.
Yeah.
It was too much sun.
Right.
We didn't. I think it just automatically did it.
It's
right?
automated. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm able to set all the parameters on my laptop to adjust and say, okay, I want a 2-minute dead band, and once it hits above this many degrees, it's going to pull the shade cloth. Well, this much wind, it's going to close the walls down 30%. This much wind, 70%, all the way down. So, learning how to manipulate that greenhouse has been really cool learning process. But so to your original question, an outdoor cultivator's job can be anywhere from running a skid loader to working a microscope looking for pests. So I always say I need warrior scholars. I can't just have a laborer. You're not working at the manufacturing plant. You're not picking crabs. I need somebody that's going to go out there that can handle the elements, can be out there in the rain and the sun and the 100-degree heat and the coldest day and the hottest day, all those things, but also care and be really delicate when they're pruning a plant or topping a plant and do just the right node. So to find that balance of blue-collar scientist is more difficult than you realize when you try and find those perfect laborers.
I love that.
So I try and explain it to people, okay, this is an apprenticeship. Look at this as an apprenticeship. So if you want to be an electrician, you want to be a plumber, you want to be a chef, you have to start as the prep cook. You sit there and you shovel soil for months. You go out there and you pound poles, you put together a drip line, you put your sweat equity in just getting those reps down. And we'll start teaching you all the different aspects of cultivation because it really is a complex, a complex plan that we go through each year. And then after a year to 2 years to 3 years, you go from being the lowest guy on the totem pole that doesn't know anything about cannabis, doesn't know anything about organic farming, and by the end of it, you're a pro. You're this finely honed weapon that we've made that can now grow cannabis anywhere. And so I try and preach that to my guys and say, hey, I know you're sweating out here right now. I know it's hard work and you're out in the sun, but you're gaining these skills that you'll have for life. So really, I try and train people to be, almost like a Renaissance man. We do plumbing and irrigation and site work, and we may need to do grading or use a skid loader or a big tractor, or we need to be taking soil samples. That's a lot of what we do is soil, leaf samples. We're always testing because we're doing, trying to do like a no-till organic style farming. That takes a lot of sampling and a lot of reading soil test reports, and then we use an agronomist who helps us interpret those soil test reports to make sure we get it just right, and then you're doing dry amendments and liquid amendments and all those type of things to try and balance it just right. So really, as it depends on your position in the operation. So you may be doing vastly different things. If you're the IPM specialist, then you're scouting all day long looking through a microscope. If you're my pump room attendant, then you have this huge dram system with 3 RO machines and an ozone skid that you're maintaining and keeping that all going.
The water systems within these facilities, as you can imagine, are incredibly extensive and important. And for the indoor facilities, it's how the plants get fed. It's how they get all of their nutrients. It's how they get everything. But in the outdoor facilities, it's probably equally as important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do most of our amending, all of our nutrients we're doing in raw bulk amendments that's getting top dressed onto the beds for the most part. That's how we'll do it. And we'll do some water soluble raw bulk amendments as well. But the actual drip lines just drip pure RO water that's untreated. There's nothing to it. There's nothing added to it. It's just pure RO water. But in order to keep it clean and pure, we need to have we have our RO machines producing the water. We have an ozone skid that's adding ozone to keep it clean. We have a chiller that keeps it at the right temperature. So we have 36,000 gallons of water storage. But to maintain all that water at the perfect temperature, at the perfect dissolved oxygen amount in there to keep the water clean, or in the wintertime when the water's too cold and you need to warm the water up, and then all the different pumps and systems and stuff like that. It is a complex system, but we are really fortunate. We just upgraded this year using DRAM. DRAM designed and installed this huge water system, so we got that up and running this year, awesome. And it's from a farmer's perspective, it's really badass. Yeah, it's like awesome. That's the thing that gets me juiced up. Yeah, I'm like, wow, look at this thing go. Yeah, it's like the Ferrari of water systems,
right?
Yeah,
and that's a big deal. I mean, I was in a CULTA. I think it's changed now, but like I saw one of the early cultivators, and they were still hand watering.
Oh yeah, and we still do some hand water depending on situational stuff, but we try to minimize that and use drip irrigation mostly. Yeah.
Does any of that stuff at outdoor go to fresh frozen?
Oh yeah, yep. We try to project percentiles of how much we want to go to fresh frozen, how much we want to dry hang. The fresh frozen, it's a little bit more labor intensive harvesting for fresh frozen than it is just to hang it up and dry it.
Sure.
So
I'm a connoisseur. Like I love fresh frozen products.
Yeah.
Really and with the outdoor, the chance to get even higher terpenes out of the flower, and then synthesize that into a concentrate product with some of those terpene profiles get out of control and
Definitely,
beautiful.
definitely. So yeah, be looking for outdoor live products. All the fresh frozen we're trying to get some fresh frozen of each strain so that we'll have a wide variety of fresh frozen products for everyone.
And I know how much more labor, how less profitable the fresh frozen stuff is. I mean, there's way economically, there's way other varieties of ways that you can utilize that flower. But for the connoisseurs like me and the folks that are really looking for strong terpene profiles, that's what we want. You deliver it. So we really appreciate that.
I think when I was going out in California, I was selling to the dispensaries, and I was looking around at all the other farms out there growing, and there was clearly two very different models. There was least amount of investment and grow whatever you grew and just try to grow the biggest volume of it. And yeah, you got less dollars per pound, but you grew more pounds of it, and therefore you made up your money that way, and you didn't put much labor or time into it. And so I understood that was one method, but I wasn't interested in that. I was too small of an operation to really right. Scale up that big. So, and to operate within the parameters of the law, you were allowed 30 plants per medical card at the time. And so I had 4 or 5 medical cards in the collective, so I had a limited plant count number. And my thought was, well, if I grow it organically and the highest quality possible, then it'll be worth way more per pound.
Sure.
And so I think, you look at it kind of compared to, let's say, alcohol, where, sure, you can make box wine or you make a $300 bottle of wine. And so those are two very different, And
the difference is the grapes.
Right.
For the most part, right?
Right.
I mean, there's some difference, but a lot of it is the quality of grapes and the quality of...
Exactly. So my mind has always been, well, let me make the highest end boutique product possible, and that's where the value is. And this race to the bottom, no one's had. Then the people get a shitty product. You have to scale up and maybe have growing practices that aren't quite as scrupulous, and do these things where you're ended up making a product that people settle for because of the price point, as opposed to get excited for and be willing to pay whatever for it. So that's always been...
I think that's the fear of multi-state operators and these big, larger conglomerates coming in, is that there's a presence of a craft style in how we do things. There's
right.
so much ownership taking place within the products that come out, and so much pride within the products that come out. I will do everything I can to fight to preserve that and make sure that's still how it is, because I mean it is. It's amazing. We think about Maryland only being in around for 4 years, and being able to compete with anywhere in the country. Like, I look at the stuff that's out, our flour, our concentrates, and I feel like it's as good as anywhere else. And we have the lab results and the tests and the knowledge. A good buddy of mine just went out to California. He's in the industry here. And we went up to a dispensary, and the dispensary agent goes, "This one's loud, but this one's louder." No terpenes, no lab profiles, no explanation on what was going on, just loud and louder. And our staff is really focused on guiding patients through a terpene profile and things like that.
We've been able to avoid so far in the Maryland market is that you still have these high-end places that are still competing and trying to bring the highest quality flower to the market possible. And
it's exciting times, and I think it'll just get better. I thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and telling us a little bit about the outdoor and
absolutely.
CULTA, and hope to have you back. With some new advances. So how many acres are you guys growing on right now?
We have 3 acres right now. We have 2 uncovered, just full outdoor acres, and 1 acre under the Cravo greenhouse. So is
there a blueprint to expand on that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a 10-year plan. CULTA has very, very high goals. They want to do all kinds of expansion and really up the game in a lot of different ways.
We'll be excited to have you back on and be able to share some of those advances.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.